Hey guys, today I'm going to be doing my July wrap up. I was able to read 5 books. Definitely would like to do better next month for sure, but this is what I got for now. The first book I was able to finish is called The Ivory Key, and it's by Akshay Raman. Sorry if I'm absolutely butchering it. This book is about 4 siblings who are part of the royal family, I guess you could call it, of this kingdom. In this kingdom or world in general, magic is a thing and it can be wielded through objects. So people themselves aren't magic. The magic is mined from like this quarry of sorts and is kind of transferred into objects. And so whoever holds whatever item is able to have the magic, if that makes sense. We hear at the beginning of the story that magic is disappearing. And in order to restore magic, they have to find this magical item called the Ivory Key to unlock the magic from this secret area. And so in the book, they have to find the pieces of the map and then find the Ivory Key itself. Honestly, I feel really bad because I do not have a whole lot to say about this book. There were points during it when I was entertained, but then there were times when I was kind of bored as well. The end of the book in particular, like the last maybe 30% felt super rushed, almost as if it was on a deadline and had to get the book done overnight. That's just the vibe I got from it. I don't know if like any of you guys who have read this book felt the same way, but that was definitely how I felt reading the end of this book. Also, towards the end, I felt that, and not only like towards the end, but when they were going on this journey to look for this key, I felt that a lot of things just happened to fall into place super easily. Like they found the answers that they needed super quick, and it was just like, okay. Also, there were instances at the end where, and this isn't really a spoiler, it's just that things that had high stakes throughout the book were kind of dismissed to the side, I guess. And I didn't really like that because I was like, all right, all this build up for what? There were some things that I did like about this book. I really liked the way the author handled the point of view. So we are being narrated to from 4 different points of view from the 4 siblings, but it is not first person, which I really liked. She just kept it third person, so I really did appreciate that. I did like reading about the dynamics between the siblings. I thought that that was really well done. Some siblings were closer to each other than others were, and I also liked reading about their relationships with their parents when their parents were still alive. And I did like reading about the history of the Ivory Key and the secret society that forged it. I remember being very entertained during that part of the book. But then there were parts of the book as well that I felt kind of fell flat. So yeah, not a lot to say about this book. I kind of just finished it because I wanted to finish it pretty much, and not because I was super invested in the story. This is apparently, I don't know if it's going to be a duology or a series, but it is set up for a at least one other book. I do not know if I will be picking that up, unfortunately. Also, with some of the marketing, it was kind of marketed as the characters having to solve a lot of puzzles to find this key, and that really wasn't the case. I understand that it's a novel and it's not like a puzzle workbook or something, but if you're going to market it as something where puzzles are like a prominent part, I think puzzle should be a prominent part. I can't decide if I want to give this 2.5 or 3 stars. I guess we'll go with 3 stars. Oh yeah, and this is kind of interesting. So there's a map in the front of the book, and see this kingdom right here? It's called Lyria. It's gonna be a segue into my next book that I finished, which is The Starless Crown by James Rollins. There's a map in the beginning of this book as well, and check it out. It also has a place called Lyria. Interesting. I wonder if they used the same name generator. But yeah, anyway, so the next book I read was The Starless Crown by James Rollins. Or is it Rowlands? I don't really know. This book is a fantasy story about a bunch of people who are pretty much they're all trying to escape from something. Some of these things are common, they have in common with other people, but the overall arching theme in this book is that there is going to be a catastrophic natural event. Our main character, Nyx, foretells this event, and she, along with a bunch of other people, are trying to survive pretty much. And this is the first in what is going to be a series, the Moonfall series. What did I think about this book? There were things I liked and things I didn't like. Just like with the Ivory Key, there were parts where I was entertained and kept reading. There were some moments that were funny where I found myself laughing and like just rereading things because I thought it was so funny. I liked the fact in this book also that even though it's being told from multiple points of view, it's being told from a third person omniscient narrator, not first person, which again, I really do enjoy when there's multiple points of view. Some of the characters I think showed real emotion. Like, for example, sometimes if there's grief, it actually shows the person being affected by that grief. Like, they don't just feel it for one page and then move on. It's something that follows them throughout the book. However, there were parts of this book that I just found myself skipping over because I felt like sometimes it was just too, I don't know, too prosy. There was just too much description. And if someone's, say, walking across a section of land or whatever, it's just every single thing that person is thinking and sees, I feel like is described sometimes. And it gets like that a lot during the battle scenes and chase scenes, which there was so many of. After a while, I just felt myself skipping over them. I understand that, especially with a fantasy series, there has to be a good amount of world building, but I felt like a lot of the time not a lot was happening. As far as the characters were concerned, I mean, I think they were okay. There weren't any characters that I particularly didn't like that I could rant about, but then again, I felt like some of them just kind of blended together for me. Like Raif, I think his name was, and Prince Kant. For some reason, sometimes they just blended in my head. I know they had totally different backstories, but I don't know. I think my favorite character is probably Frel, the alchemist or whatever. I don't know why. I don't know if that's saying a lot or not. So yeah, as I said, this is the first book in a series. I don't know if I want to pick up the next book. I don't know. And I hate to be like a 3-star person, but I would have to give this book 3 stars. This is going to be a slight spoiler, so I am going to just put a timestamp where you guys can just stop watching here if you don't want a spoiler. It's not like a major spoiler, but I don't want anyone who wants to read this book to feel like I gave them a spoiler or anything. So you have been warned. Feel free to go to the timestamp to skip past this. It is hinted in the books to come, there is going to be a love triangle. And it's just, whenever I read about that, I just felt really uncomfortable. It was between Prince Cath and Nyx, who apparently, they might be half siblings. I don't think they're half siblings, but just the fact that Prince Cath thinks to himself, oh, I don't care if she's my half sister, I still have these feelings for her anyway. That just really rubbed me the wrong way. So if I do decide to continue with this book, which I really don't think I will, yeah, that part's just going to bother me. Oh yeah, and fellow 90s babies. When we learn about the Brittle song and how that's a power, did anyone else think about the movie The Princess and the Goblin? Because I certainly did. And the other semi-spoiler that I have for this book is that, obviously, if you've read it, if you're watching this, you probably read it. How misleading is this? It like makes it out to be a story that's like this epic tale of all these people traveling together, and that is not the case. As you may or may not know, they don't even all meet up until maybe like, this is a 540 something page book. They don't meet until at least page, like, we're in the 400s, and when they do finally all get together, they're together for maybe 2 or 3 pages before they split up. So yeah, I was really disappointed in that. The next book I read was A Forgery of Roses by Jessica S. Olson. This book is about our main character, Myra, who has the this special power where she can paint people, and through her painting, she's able to manipulate other people's bodies. For example, if you have a cut on your arm and you have her paint you, she can make it so the cut goes away by painting you and then painting over the cut. She goes to the governor's mansion to try to paint the governor's son back to life because he has recently been killed. And she's summoned to do this by the governor's wife in secret. While she is there, she meets the governor's son, whose name is August. Actually, August is the one who picks her up from her house. Boy, was I disappointed in this book. I was not a fan of the romance at all. As soon as I started reading about it, it immediately annoyed me. He had the, super awkward, like, meet cute where, so Myra is obviously staying at the governor's house, so she obviously has to pack a lot of clothes, and her underwear, like, blows out of her bag because it's like a windy day or whatever. And of course, August finds the underwear and it's just, oh, so embarrassing. And there's the also annoying trope of, trying to make the main characters touch in any way. It just was really forced. I also had issues distinguishing between the characters. I feel like no character had their own distinct voice. Maybe Vince, I don't know. He was really the only character that I was semi-interested in. Even though sometimes I was like, okay, well, he kind of talks like August a little bit. He kind of talks like Myra, so I don't know. There was a section of this book that was very slow, and when she was trying to solve like the murder mystery aspect of it, I felt like she just stumbled upon certain clues so easily. It's like, oh yeah, you just happen to look here and wham, a clue. I don't know. Also, especially in the beginning, a big part of Myra and August's romance is pretty much like them putting themselves down and the other person talking the other person up. Like, oh man, how romantic. Let's talk crap about ourselves. But yeah, definitely very disappointed in this book. I finished it just to say I finished it pretty much. It's hinted that there might be another book to come. I will not be reading that one more than likely. I would give this book 2.5 stars. Alrighty, switching gears here. Next book we have is The Book of Cold Cases by Simone St. James. Again, when I want to talk about the spoilers, I will put that in a different chapter. So first off, with this book, I didn't do my research when it came to this book. I saw the title of the book and I read a quick synopsis of it and I thought it was going to be a true crime book. But then I found out it was, yeah, a true crime book, but there were also some supernatural elements to it, which I was not expecting. I have not read anything, nor have I heard of Simone St. James before hearing about this book, so I didn't have the luxury of being like, oh, well, she writes in this genre, so this book must be in that genre too. I didn't want to know too much about this book going in because I have fallen victim into reading too many, cover synopsises of everything like that and having the book been given away, so I didn't read the back of the book. But I did read the flap, and it does say some crimes come back to haunt you, but I didn't think that was like a pun as in actually haunting. Then it also says something about things move around without the person knowing. And it also mentions something about someone being, they could have swore they saw a girl in the window or something like that, but I thought there was a reasonable explanation for that. There is a scene actually in Book of Night where that actually happened. So, I guess I was in that frame of mind. I just thought there was a logical explanation. This isn't a spoiler. This book has some supernatural stuff in it, and I will talk about that later. This book is about a woman named Shay who writes a blog with the namesake of this book, The Book of Cold Cases. She works at a doctor's office, and this blog is something that she does on the side, at night after she goes home. And she, while working at the doctor's office, sees one of the patients at the doctor's office that she works at is Beth Greer, who was a suspect in a couple of murders dating back to the 1970s. She murdered these two men and left taunting notes for the police, kind of like the female Zodiac killer, which she is referred to in this book by some people. This gun that was used to kill these people was also used to kill her father years earlier. There's a witness who claims to have seen Beth at one of the murders of these men. Even though she's acquitted, she's still kind of lost in the court of public opinion. This book is pretty much about Shay trying to make sense of that case years later. I personally didn't mind the beginning of the book. I did read some reviews of people who thought it was slow, and I guess I could understand that, but I personally didn't mind it. This book is told in dual narrations here, being narrated from Shay's point of view and this third person narrator. The parts that the third person narrator tells us about is 1977 as third person. I wish if we were going to do dual narrations that it was just either kept one way, not first person and third person. Shay's part of the book was first person. I don't know. The shift just kind of annoyed me. I don't know. Maybe that's just a petty technical thing, but So yeah, we learned what went on back in the 70s when all of this was going on, as well as, the modern day Beth talking and doing these interviews with Shay. Shay herself has had some things happen to her in the past. This book is divided into two parts. I really don't think the supernatural part of this book really lent anything to it. It just wasn't there enough. And honestly, I really think it could have been removed completely and it still would have been a full story. It just kind of felt like it was shoehorned in there for the sake of being in there. Actually, I think it took away from the story, and that really did take a part in my rating. So yeah, the first part of the book, for the most part, and the second part of the book, I absolutely loved. Even though the part of the narration kind of annoyed me a little bit, and the fact that romance was going to be shoehorned in that I really didn't think need to be there, I really thought this was going to be a solid 4-star read for me. I even started to look past the whole supernatural thing, even though that wasn't what I quote unquote signed up for with picking this book up. But then in the second part of the book, like more towards the end, it just kind of all fell flat for me. And I will get into more specifics about that in the spoiler part of this review. But yeah, I didn't like the way the book ended. I thought a lot of it was kind of cliche. I didn't like the treatment of some of the characters. There was a romance that was forced. And the fact that I really did think that the supernatural part of this book really didn't add anything to it at all. It could have been its own story without it. If anything, I think it took away from the story because it played into a part and at the end of the book that I really thought was just dumb, honestly. So yeah, as I said, it would have been a solid 4-star read for me. But then towards the end, I had to bump it down to a 3. I really did enjoy the first part of the book and the beginning of the second part of the book enough to keep it as a 3. I really wish just the parts at the first half of the second part of the book could have been its own story in itself. I think that, and they could have kept it as just a murder mystery based on that. I would have really enjoyed it. Some other things I didn't like about the book. The name of the book of Cold Cases, really doesn't have anything to do with the book. I understand that's the name of the blog, but this goes into another issue I had with the book. We're not really told much about this blog and the other cases in it. If this was a book about the blog itself and we delved into the many cold cases that Shay researched, then that would be the perfect title for this book. But it's not. It's about the Beth Greer case. So yeah, I was suckered in by the title. I thought it was going to be about a bunch of different cold cases when I was thinking about reading it, but it was only about one, so why keep the name? I don't know. But yeah, going off that again, the blog was not a prominent part of the book at all. And one of the things that really annoys me in writing is telling, not showing. And this book, in regards to who Shay was, had a very bad case of this. Multiple people say that Shay is a good writer and that her blog is so good, and we are never shown that. We're not shown excerpts from the blog at all. And it's really funny because at the end of the book, you know, when everything's being surmised and everything like that, there are newspaper articles about what was going on. Why couldn't we have gotten an excerpt from Shay's blog? I mean, that's the name of the book, and it's the whole book is apparently supposed to be about this blog, but we don't see the blog. I just think that would have made a lot more sense. And I also think it would have made more sense to show more of the blog towards the beginning of the book. You know, maybe instead of showing these, you know, alternating dual timelines, we could have gotten maybe one chapter that's like just one long blog post. So we could see what good of a writer Shay supposedly is, and we can learn more about what the case that we're reading about is going to be about. But yeah, she's working with this private investigator. His name is Michael, and at one point he's like, "You're a writer, Shay." You know, and I was just like, oh, that was just so cringe to me because it's like, is she? I don't know. I've never read about it. I've never seen examples of her writing. And this is a book, you know, so we should be able to be shown that. And then there was this cop who worked, oh no, a detective who worked on the case in the 1970s. And he's like, "I read your blog. I think you could be the person to crack this case." And I even think Beth Greer herself at one point is like, "I read your blog. That's why I wanted to talk to you." Okay, well, all these people are ranting and raving about this blog. What about it? What's so great about it? Okay, I'm sorry. I just feel like I'm repeating myself a bunch of different ways, but that just really irked me about this book. But again, I was able to look past these things. I know I'm talking a lot about them, but I was able to look past them for, as I said, the first half and the first half of the second part of the book. The end just made it crash and burn for me. It's time for me to go into the details as to why exactly that was. And so here's the spoiler part. I just thought the ending was really cheap. You know, Lily's ghost pushing Shay off a cliff. That really needs to happen. I just thought that that added to, you know, the cliche and the dramatics. Like it ends with our main character in the hospital bed talking to the love interest who is Michael, you know, finally telling him about her past. It was just all so cliche. I did unfortunately have one DNF, and it was Book of Night by Holly Black. I want to preface this by saying this is my first book by her. I have never read the Crew Prince series. That's not really something that I think would be my thing. And honestly, I didn't think this book would be my thing either. I just heard a description of it and I was like, okay, this could be interesting, so why don't I check it out? I thought that it was going to be about secret societies and stuff like that, and it really wasn't. I don't think that's a spoiler by any means either. This book is about a woman named Posey who used to be somewhat of a thief in the town where she lives in. She used to work for a group of people called Glomus who use shadow magic. She finds herself looking for this special book called The Book of Night for this billionaire named Lionel Salt. Lionel Salt wants this book because he believes that it has some sort of power to control very powerful shadows or blights. I really wish I could tell you more about the magic system and about the world, but honestly, it's pretty much the world we live in today, but there's shadow magic. And honestly, I don't really have a big grasp on the magic system. I even took notes on my phone with like page numbers with definitions and stuff like that. And maybe it's because I didn't really read this book in one sitting. I read it over the span of a few weeks and it didn't resonate with me enough to remember, but I just kept forgetting like, who's this person? What type of person is this again? What's this type of magic, whatever. I just couldn't keep track of it all. I felt like there were a lot of rules that were kind of made up as the book went along. There's this one thing, I think it's called a hierro plant or something. I could not understand what that is. There's this one passage where she talks about what it is, and I read it over and over, and I was like, she didn't really explain this that well. But yeah, I'm really sorry that I couldn't give a better summary about it. The main character, Charlie, also has a boyfriend in this book named Vince, and she has a sister named Posey. When the book starts, Charlie is working at a bar. This book is narrated in third person, and it's kind of told in dual timelines, like the past and the present. I don't know why. That is one thing that kind of irks me as far as perspectives are concerned, unless it's done really well. And honestly, I just don't think that it needed to be done here. I'll go more into that a little bit later. I think this book would have been a little bit better for me if they just had a first person narrator, Charlie narrating the story. And there's a reason why I think this. The narrator, this third person narrator, had such a distinct voice and talked like you would think Charlie would be thinking. Like it's almost as if a character in the book was telling the story because they inserted kind of their own opinions and used words that was kind of like as if they were talking to you casually. Which, if the book was being narrated by Charlie, that would have been great because I would have known more about Charlie and the way that she spoke and, her thoughts and stuff like that. The narrator seemed to be a different character all by themselves. The narrator cursed. The narrator used words like Yahtzee. It just felt like a conversation sometimes, which is fine. I just think that would have worked better if it was from Charlie's point of view. Maybe the reason why she chose to do this is because even though it did tell a lot about Charlie's past in the alternating timeline chapters, it did tell about other people's past that Charlie didn't necessarily know about, so maybe that's why that decision was made. Another thing that really irked me was the way this was narrated in certain ways when the narrator said things all the time like Charlie Hall was unlucky. It was because Charlie Hall was this. Charlie Hall was that. And from a writing standpoint, I can understand that's kind of a storytelling device. It's a good way to bring a point across. Let's say it that way. It's a good form of narration. I've used it myself sometimes, and I can totally understand what the author was going for, but it was just done so many times, and after a while, I got sick of hearing it because the narrator was like putting Charlie down as if the narrator felt sorry for her. And that's also why I think it would have been better if it was Charlie narrating this, because then we could just chalk it up to, oh, Charlie's just self-loathing. Here, it was like the narrator is being self-loathing towards Charlie. And honestly, it annoyed me a little bit. I didn't keep track of all of the examples, but when I was scrolling through for this review, it was very easy for me to find a few of them. I am going to give you a few examples to show you what I mean. She was the exact same Charlie Hall she'd always been. Messy, impulsive, alone. Charlie Hall, drawn to a bad idea like a moth to a wool sweater. Every hustle an opportunity to let her worst impulses out to play. When she looked in the mirror, Charlie Hall was gone. It was more of a relief to her than she'd like to admit. He levered up to kiss her, mouth careful, as though she was something fragile and precious, spun sugar, the wing of a butterfly, someone who wasn't a human callus, or a rock ready to be thrown through a window, someone who wasn't Charlie Hall. Charlie Hall, maker of mistakes, patron saint of disaster. There'd always been something wrong with Charlie Hall. Crooked from the day she was born. Never met a bad decision she wasn't willing to double down on. That was her problem. Charlie Hall, never satisfied unless every last carcass was turned over and every last maggot revealed. Honestly, this just happened so many times, and after a while, I just got so sick of it. It even says here, like I'm just looking right now, it says she was a poisoned well of a girl, which is fine if she wants to think about herself like that, that's one thing, but it was just really weird just having a narrator do that all the time, and I just couldn't after a while. And I'm sorry, like, I don't know if the goal was to get us to feel sorry for her, but I did not at all. And yeah, she did make some bad decisions in the book, but I mean, nothing too drastic, I don't think. Like, not something to warrant all this stuff. I don't know. I'm exhausted just talking about it, honestly. It was also really interesting reading this book around the same time I was reading Forgery of Roses because there's events in this book, there's events in the other book, and I was just like, oh my gosh, my brain. Now, I really don't want to come across as mean-spirited. There actually were some things I did like about this book. And as much as I've been complaining about the conversational tone of the narrator, it was entertaining, I will say. That's why I really wish this narrator was Charlie, because it would have endeared me more to her and I would have liked her more, as I mentioned. But I was entertained sometimes. And as I said, I wasn't a huge fan of the whole dual timeline thing. I didn't really see how that was needed. But at the same time, especially towards the beginning of the book, I really, really did enjoy the chapters where we were going into Charlie's past. I really did enjoy them. I really was entertained by them. There wasn't a whole lot of action, should we say, in them. And it was character building. But I really did enjoy the stories. And I think it would have been so cool if we had just maybe started with those in like a linear timeline. And then maybe if this is going to be a series, just kind of work up to that. I don't know. That's just my opinion. I personally really did enjoy the chapters that were told in the past. Most of them. And even though I'm kind of picking on some of the, choices made when doing the narration, I really do think that Holly Black is a good writer. I was not reading this thinking this woman cannot write. The story itself just didn't work for me. I stopped reading at page 199, I believe it was, and at that point I only had like 100 or so pages to go, 100, 105, 110 at most, or whatever. I just did not care enough about the story to just read the last 100 pages. Honestly, I really didn't. I was just bored. But yeah, I was disappointed. I really wanted to like this book. And because I did enjoy reading the scenes from the past, I think I'm going to go with a 2.78. Because I don't think it's exactly a 3, but I don't think it's a 2.5 either. We're just a little bit in between. So yeah, those are all the books that I finished in July. Not the very best reading month, but that is expected to happen from time to time, I suppose. Definitely am hoping to read more books in August, and I do have a book blog that I will link below. I am doing a individual review of every single one of these books, and they will be a little bit more fleshed out, and I'm definitely better at expressing myself through writing than I am just with talking. So if you want to check that out, feel free. Yeah, let me know what you guys read in the month of July, if you've read any of these books and what you thought about them, and I will see you guys really soon. Bye.